Today on the AI Daily Brief, we're talking about a question which is more interesting than it appears at first: how to price AI agents. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today we are talking about agent pricing. And while this may seem like it's just insider baseball or only relevant for startups that are trying to figure things out, I actually think that it's much more important than that. The agent pricing conversation is not just about how startups and tech companies are thinking about things, but also implicates how enterprises are imagining and considering agents. Are agents software to be procured in the same way that SaaS was before? Are they digital employees to be hired? How does the answer to those two questions impact how they should be paying for them? It is absolutely the case that agent pricing will shape and have a deterministic impact on agent and AI business models, which will have impact on things like company design, all of which is to say this is actually an important conversation. Now, the specific context that prompts us to have this conversation today is that Windsurf has sort of kicked off a price war on AI coding assistants. Their standard pro tier is now priced at $15 per month, with an allowance for 500 prompts before requiring a top-up. They're also getting rid of their Flow Action credit system, which charges for tool calls within an agentic workflow. The company says this means you can only pay per user prompt. Tech and enterprise subscriptions also saw a price drop to $30 per month and $60 per month, respectively. CEO Rob Hu made it clear that this was a direct shot at Cursor. Although he didn't mention the rival company by name, his announcement post stated, "With today's pricing update, Windsurf now has by far the most affordable pricing structure of all AI coding tools on the market." And in a very pointed comparison, he added, "Compare that to any of the other tools where $20 per month gets you less prompts, confusing requests, and hidden charges for tool calls, or the absolute worst case scenario, paying per token." And not charging for tool calls is a big deal as agentic coding gets more complex. Windsurf is charging a flat rate while complex Cursor prompts can easily balloon to cost $1 or $2 each. CEO Rob here is very much hustling. He spent hours this week replying to potential customers, commenting on how they want to see the service structured and priced. Of course, this all comes in the background of a rumored OpenAI acquisition. The deal isn't finalized, but according to well-sourced reporting, OpenAI is looking at a $3 billion price tag to buy the company. Alongside the price drops, Windsurf announced users will get another week of free and unlimited usage of the newly released GPT-4.1 and o4 mini models. It is a question, I think, about whether Windsurf remains profitable at these price levels or if they're subsidizing users to gain market share. In their announcement post, the company said that their infrastructure engineers have been able to optimize GPU usage and that they are delivering on their promise to, quote, pass savings back to our end users. Obviously, I'm now watching closely to see if Cursor fires back to commence a full-scale pricing war in one of the fastest-growing verticals in tech history. So as I said, that is the specific genesis of the conversation today. But this agent pricing conversation is happening more broadly. Aaron Levy from Box recently wrote, "Nailing AI agent pricing is a super important topic for AI companies right now. There are two dynamics at play in AI pricing land. The first dynamic is that the models themselves are getting cheaper and cheaper to run, but the other trend is that the use cases for customers are requiring more and more inference. We've seen examples of deep research using up to 100x the compute of a standard query before. AI coding agents similarly can consume enormous resources depending on the task. So even as the inference gets cheaper per token, the total inference goes up dramatically. A normal thing to do with resource pricing is to effectively shift the cost of the resource onto the customer. It's a clean model, but there are many areas where a key customer use case may be technically possible but unaffordable today, even though they will become affordable tomorrow. So, do you wait to solve the problem when it's economically practical to scale, or lean in now and bet on the costs improving? The answer probably would be different in any other technology category in history, but the implications of AI model efficiency improvements is that software companies can afford to price AI in a way that anticipates the cost curve over time. This allows you to unlock use cases today that may be otherwise less economically attractive, but where you know they soon will be. It's definitely a bet, but one that increasingly seems like it will pay off. This is all thanks to the constant AI breakthroughs coming from the frontier labs as well as open weights model providers. And this doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. So Aaron here in this particular case is not discussing heuristics or models or frameworks for pricing, but instead just the changes in cost of goods sold, and specifically the countervailing forces driving it in two directions: cheaper to run models, but more inference required use cases. At the beginning of April, Manny Medina, the founder of Paid, wrote a post on the Growth Unhinged blog called A New Framework for AI Agent Pricing. The analysis comes after looking at dozens and dozens of different AI agent startups, and Manny divided their pricing models into 4 different quadrants. They are per workflow, where you pay per completed workflow; per agent outcome, where you pay per completed objective; So both of these are outcome-based, one based on successfully completing a workflow and one based on successfully completing an objective, however many workflows it took. And then another category is what Manny calls activity-based. So that's, for example, a fixed monthly fee per agent. This is sort of a replacement model for FTEs, or then a pay-for-usage, a per-action agent, or a consumption model. As Manny points out, these different models are good for different types of companies. The FTE replacement model, a price per agent, he says is best for AI agents handling broad responsibilities or entire job functions with consistent, predictable workloads. He points out that the advantage is that you get to draw from the headcount budget or labor budget, which is at least 10x larger than the software budget, but that in many cases, this leaves you subject to other companies that just charge less. The consumption model or price per agent action, he suggests is best for agents performing varied, discrete tasks with unpredictable frequency or volume. The price per agent workflow, aka the process automation model, he says is best for agents that execute multi-step processes with clear intermediate deliverables. And the price per agent outcome, aka the results-based model, he says is best for AI applications with predictable performance and clearly defined success metrics in markets that already expect it. Now, I want to go back to his FTE replacement comparison to a post from last year from Y Combinator called Vertical AI Agents Could Be 10x Bigger Than SaaS. This was actually on their podcast. And basically the argument here is that if agents actually are replacing big swaths of human labor, then they're competing for labor budgets, not software budgets, with labor budgets being radically higher than software budgets. The interesting tension that we're already seeing over here at Superintelligent as companies get introduced to agents is whether they're going to be priced in reference to the equivalent human labor or in reference to the cost of goods sold with some amount of margin. I think the agent companies in general are trying to keep the comparison to the comparative human labor. And that makes sense because those budgets, again, are much larger. The challenge is a couple pieces. First of all, if you're trying to say, my agent does the work of a junior developer and a junior developer would cost $100,000, but my agent's only going to cost $40,000, it's almost for sure that someone who can provision that agent for much cheaper is going to say, well, screw that. It doesn't matter that the human equivalent was $100,000. The thing only cost me a couple $1,000s to run, so for $5,000, you can have it. Basically, there is likely competitive pressure which pushes prices down. The other thing is that some of the use cases that agents will be used for won't be able to be priced compared to their human labor because a priori the cost of human labor would have been so high previously that no one would have ever considered doing the thing. I have a very specific example from our agent readiness audits. As part of the audits, we do voice agent interviews, which can be across a handful of leaders or it could be across every single person inside a department. Right now, we're live with a big pharma company with all 200 members of a specific department of theirs. And the problem, if we had tried to price that against what it would have cost for McKinsey to interview all 200 people in that department, is that we know a priori that the cost of McKinsey interviewing 200 people like that would be so astronomical that they never would even consider that. So we can't sit there and say, hey, if you asked McKinsey to do this, it would be $300,000, and we only want to charge you $100,000, because they'd say, yeah, but we never would even consider paying that because it's so out of range as to be irrelevant for our actual planning. And so we were left, in our circumstance, having to price it closer to the reference point of the cost of goods sold, because what we're doing is fundamentally opening up new opportunities that simply weren't possible before agents. Now, one really interesting countervailing note comes from Signal. They wrote, was talking to someone else deep in AI, and we started riffing on how agent pricing could spiral into totally uncharted territory. Like if someone builds a quote-unquote perfect agent for legal diligence or biotech, and is protected by real moats, data, evaluation frameworks, workflow lock-in, and trust, they could charge above human rates and still be the obvious choice. 24/7, few errors, infinite scale. Kind of ridiculous that the floor for AI labor is maybe heading towards zero, but the ceiling could possibly go infinite, at least in the near term. Now, this is one of those things that really requires a lot of imagination around what the moats would be that would even justify this. But I think a relevant takeaway, no matter what, is that agents aren't just going to be competing on cost. Their permanent and perpetual availability, their massive scalability, these are things that make them better than their human equivalent, not just a better choice because they're cheaper. Again, to round up with the same example of the voice agent interviews we use for the agent readiness audits, if you wake up with insomnia at 1:30 a.m., you're welcome to do your interview then. You don't have to schedule it with us. You can do it at your own convenience. And that is a massively better experience than if we were doing traditional voice interviews with our analysts. Anyway, all of this I think is interesting, and not just in a theoretical way, but in a way that will shape the future of the AI and agent space. For now, though, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening as always, and until next time, peace.